So if we move into, I'm going way over time, aren't I? If we move into maintenance activities, once your DMF has been reviewed and you've gotten, it's passed enough that the NDA, the applicant it has gotten approved. Even though you're not approved, it doesn't just sit there. You have to maintain it. So DMF holder responsibility. One of the items is an annual update. This is very different from an annual report that a drug product applicant has to do. This is not required by regulation, but it is highly recommended. And if you're not even doing an annual update to your DMF, this will trigger the FDA to look at that list and say, hey, do you still want this DMF? Do something within 30 days or you're going to inactive status. So this is one way to at least just keep you active if you just do this annual update. Again, it's not required. The timing, it could be on the anniversary date that you submitted the DMF. Maybe you want to align it with your internal product review or some other time. Again, this is very different from a finished product holder who has to submit an annual report, and it is due by regulation on a certain day. You have a little more play here. So the basic content of an annual update, all I like to do is do the transmittal letter and basically update the Module 1, and that's it. I also like to include the stability data that's been acquired since the last annual update or since the initial submission. But you do have to clarify in your transmittal letter. Remember I said they're very specific about what they want in the title of that transmittal letter. You need to include annual update and I think it's original update. I can't remember the exact terms, but you need to look at those categories and include both categories on your transmittal letter. They do not want any changes going in just slipped into the annual update. You need to identify that this is a change. They prefer all changes be submitted as separate amendments. So then these technical amendments is again a DMF holder responsibility. The DMF holder must report all changes as amendments. You must also notify the applicant of the changes, but you don't necessarily need to issue a new LOA. You should help and work with your applicant to determine, what level of change is this for them. For you, it's just an amendment. And you can implement the change once you've submitted that amendment to your DMF, and you can even ship that drug substance to your applicant. But you need to work with your applicant to decide, do they have any reporting requirements as a result of this change? So then the applicant responsibility, they need to submit, if it's a big enough change, they need to submit this information to their IND, NDA, ANDA, or DMF. And there's a whole host of, and I've given some links to some guidance documents. There are guidance out there for how to report post-approval changes. It gives a lot of information, but there's still a lot of room for interpretation, and you need both parties to be comfortable with the decision. Certainly if it's a big change, the applicant is going to need to in turn file a supplement saying they are aware of this change. This is how it impacts my product. They may have to do some formulation studies to make sure they can use this new material. They may have to do something different. They may want to do some batches just to make sure. They may want some stability on their finished product just to make sure that this is behaving the same as the pre-change material. So there may be some delay, and you want to understand that delay and work together. There's this old guidance backpack, and I'm not even sure if it's active still on the FDA website, but it was a good, so this changes guidance tells you if you're making this type of change, it's a prior approval supplement. If you're making this type of change, it's a CBE, it's a change that's being affected. If you're making this type of change, it's annual reportable. But it doesn't tell you the details of what you need to submit to support that change. So this backpack was pretty good about giving information about really what kind of data should you have to back up that change. If it's not still posted on the FDA website, I do have copies. I use it a lot, even though it's not official, just to, at one point in time, it was what they were thinking of what they would require. So I do use it as a reference. And I did go through this a little bit. Again, the applicant they may have additional regulatory responsibilities than what you have. Again, as a DMF holder, you submit your amendment, you can ship the material, but you need that relationship with your applicant to make sure that they don't put something on the market that shouldn't be on the market yet. So the applicant, I went through these briefly. The applicant can choose from annual report, CBE 0, CBE 30, prior approval supplement. So CBE 0, they can market the changed drug product as soon as they submit their CBE. CBE 30, they can market their drug product 30 days after they submit their CBE. Prior approval, they need to wait for the FDA to actually approve the supplement. An annual report is, there's a number of types of changes that they can gather over the course of the year, and at the annual report time, they say, here's all the changes. These were so minor, they're annual reportable. Here you go. So unlike the DMF holder just has annual update, which again, changes aren't supposed to be submitted in, and amendment. That's all the DMF holder has. I don't know if anybody wants examples of what types of changes would, or am I running out of time?
Could we have an example between a CBE 0 and a CBE 30?
You know, for drug substance, I didn't really find one. I think that's more for teasing out, you know, the differences between some drug product changes. But I did write some down, and there weren't any that jumped out at me that were CBE 30. So, for example, if you're moving to a new manufacturing site, that's probably a prior approval supplement. But if you know in advance that you're going to do that, and you want to work with your applicant, and maybe they can include a comparability protocol, maybe the FDA will be comfortable enough, and they'll move it up to a CBE 30. Then you can implement that 30 days later.
One, the new manufacturing site, actually, it can be a CBE 30.
Yeah.
You're using the same manufacturing process at one facility, and then you're moving it over to another facility, and you validate the equipment and the equivalent between the same equipment from different users.
Right.
And the manufacturer will recommend when they renew the APIs that you're filing as a CBE 30.
Right, right, yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of things can happen in, you know, a site change, and it's, what if they don't have the same equipment, or, you know, a new impurity pops up. So that you really do have to look at the details. Right, right. Right, and that there are no hiccups, and right. So yeah, so for these changes, it's hard to lump everything into one. There's always a nuance to a change. There's always, oh, well, for this particular type of product, we're concerned about this, so it's a different level of reporting requirement. Yeah, it's a little bit of a science to tease out how we want to report this. And then FDA does have some responsibility. They do need to review these amendments. And so the applicant will say, we are aware of this change. Maybe they provide some data on their drug product, and they'll say, please refer to whoever's DMF number, whatever, for the details of the change. And that's when the FDA will go in and look at your DMF amendment. So even though you've submitted the amendment, they may not look at it until your applicant has done their appropriate submission. This one was new to me, this complete update, and it fell under GDUFA. So I'm not sure that it is necessarily required for other DMFs, but under GDUFA, there's this complete update. And, oh, I put applicant responsibility. This is the DMF holder responsibility. Sorry about that. It is not the same as your annual update. Their suggested timing is every 5 years or after you've submitted 5 amendments and annual updates. So they want a refresher. They want a new complete package from you approximately every 5 years with the current information. So they don't have to go back and weed through, okay, well, was this section updated or not, particularly for a paper submission. They want it to be self-contained. They don't want you referring back to a previous submission to that DMF. And they hinted this may be a great time to convert from paper to electronic ECTD. So I feel like it's coming.
Is there a fee also when you update it? Like if you, let's say you submitted DMF 10 years ago, you deactivated it, and you now are reactivating that and updating that. Is there a fee you have to pay again?
Yes, so the fee will catch up to you. If you submitted your DMF before October 1st, 2012, but then a new applicant references your DMF, you will incur that fee. And I think in your cover letter, they want to know specifically this is reactivation.
I think only on the first applicant, so they just hit each.
Yes, they hit you
So
once.
You snuck past the toll booth, but it goes back to the toll booth.
Right,
So
right.
Then you're done.
Yeah, the fee is a one-time fee. And there was a question somewhere, can the ANDA holder pay the fee? Sure, they can pay the fee. I'll leave it to the business folks to figure out how they can get a ANDA holder to pay their fee. Yeah.
Yeah, and once you pay the fee, they add it on the list that you were talking about.
Yes.
And they add it on.
Yes, that you're
And
complete.
that's only the first time they reference it, as you say. But
Right.
you also have the facility fees to pay to.
Yes, yes.
Which is the API.
Yes, this is a separate fee from your facility
And they
fee.
range from like 30 to 45, and for the finished drug, it's like 140K to
Yes.
175.
Yeah, the finished product application fee is pretty steep. And if you mess around with their fee and they're only going to get a 75% refund, they're not going to be very happy. So keep that in mind. So really briefly, everyone's really tired. ex-US, Module 1s by definition are very different across the regions. The Module 1 is not defined in ICH. They say this is where you put your regional stuff. Module 2 are very similar. Canada has a specific format that they like. It's on their website. This is really their quality controlling document. Module 3, they all use the ICH CTD format, but the content may vary slightly. In Europe, they like to use the FARMUR instead of the USP. Packaging material, contact material, they have different regulations that they want cited than the US does. Canada, interestingly, they require actually a signed specification. So a lot of the DMFs that I do, it's a summary of what our specification is. It's not a signed document, but Canada really, they need this. Other differences, and I mentioned this before, there's no open and closed part in the US, but in Europe and Canada there are, and that's because the applicant in Europe and Canada have to include the open part in their filing. So the reviewer has it right there. And you also, in Europe and Canada, but you also need that letter of access, because then they need to go and look at the closed part, the intellectual property. So if a customer is asking you for your open part and you just have a US DMF, you don't have an open part, but they're asking for your non-proprietary information. And in the US, we only need to include this letter of authorization. The other markets, they're including a lot more information. Just to touch briefly, Ron actually launched me into the certificate of suitability activity a long time ago at Searle. This can be used for compounds that are compendial compounds in the European Pharmacopoeia. Some applicants really like this because you actually prepare your dossier, and it's in CTD format, same as what you would do for a DMF, but there is a group that actually reviews these and approves these certificates of suitability, these DMFs. What you are issued, you're issued a certificate of suitability, and it lists if you need to do, it basically says this manufacturer, API, can be controlled by the European Pharmacopoeia monograph, but with these additional tests. Usually it's residual solvents, or maybe there's an impurity, and these are the methods that they have to use, and they'll attach those methods. It also usually gives a retest period on that certificate based on what you've proposed, and there's deficiency questions you get back. There's an opportunity to have some dialogue. But at the end of the day, you have an approved DMF. So what the applicant needs to do is submit this certificate of suitability in their filing instead of the open part, which is much easier for them to handle. And also, there's guidance in Europe where if you have a certificate of suitability, there are sometimes relaxed reporting requirements if you have a certificate of suitability. So that's really attractive for applicants as well. So some customers, if you're doing business in Europe, they may request, can you please do a certificate of suitability? We don't want your European TMF.
Some countries that also has EDQM when you do a GMP inspection,
right. Yes, and yeah, you do have to state in your certificate of suitability dossier that you're ready and willing to be inspected. Yeah.
As part of issuing the certificate.
Right.
They will inspect.
Yes, okay. I don't think we were inspected for ours, but that's been a while, yeah. Right. So, yes. You got any questions? Thank you. You are a very kind audience.
The evolution of DMS in a lot of other markets around the world, it's more than a centralized place where you can go and look at which countries currently accept which types of DMS.
I have not come across one, and we've usually when we're working with an applicant who wants to go into a market, Malaysia or something, we rely on them to say, get information of exactly what do we need to provide to you. We give them the open part, but if that country needs more information, they usually get the address of where we can submit some more detailed information directly to that health authority. Yeah, but I'm not aware of a central depository. That really asked for anything. Yes, exactly.
If the DMF folder written the utility specification, the AND applicant has to, the USP remains same, USP specification remains same. The AND can keep it specification, or you have to write it in line with the API DMF.
They could keep their own specification, but they may prefer to align with what the API supplier specification is.
Justify that it is of the USP and they should.
Yeah, and it's been okay for their product. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for coming. Talked to Jennifer a little afterwards. Also, our head of QA, Dan Weissmuller, is there. So he knows a lot about the changes and such. If you have any other questions. Thanks for
Okay.
coming. Good meeting.